We're going to talk a little bit about configuration console on the Landmark product. And basically, configuration console is a way that you can do customizations and configurations without actually changing the base code. And Landmark gives you that ability. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about what configuration console is. We're going to give you some examples, one being we're going to configure the IPA web in basket. We'll talk through a little bit about what else we can configure, and then a second example, adding a new field to employee. And then we'll, at the end of the webinar, we'll take some questions. Here's our picture. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is what is configuration console. Basically, configuration console is the tool that Landmark gives you to be able to make the application GHR or finance or whatever application you're running, make it your own. So make changes to it, add fields, add security, change security without actually changing the base code. And what that provides the opportunity to do is take updates without a lot of reconfiguring or customizing the system like you used to have to do on S3.
Right, you're never ever destroying your base code on it. So that's really something that's really powerful to be able to roll out to even, your super users or your power users, and they can really get everything that they need out of the system without having to have them know COBOL or anything like that. They're just, they can work with it on their own level, and they don't have to, or they're not going to destroy anything in the back end of the system.
Right. It's not COBOL, which is make a lot of people happy. So configuration console, like we said, is the rich client tool that allows administrators and and other Landmark users the ability to configure the system. Some of the things that you can do are configure application customizations, action requests, some security, web services. You can do some cache management, and go ahead.
Yeah, and really, looking at that piece, that's really the big part where you can really spend a lot of time in configuration console, specifically with like the first couple where we're talking about application customizations and the action requests. That's really the powerful part of it. You're going to walk into any situation and we're very used to needing specific pieces of information on a field or on a form. We need extra fields. It might be on another form. It might be somewhere else within the system. Configuration console is really giving you the ability to take that information and make it actionable for people. They don't have to click around 50 billion times to get to something. They can have it display right on that screen. And again, the nice thing is we're not touching the base code. We need to take a critical update. It's okay. We can just apply that, and our configuration should be there and not blow up the regular system functionality.
Right. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the configuration, which is what we do now. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk some personalizations, which is another thing we can do, which makes it, changes the user experience, and then customizations, which we're not going to do anymore. Okay, so what Infor uses a layered approach to this, and this is how they make it so you're not gonna touch your base LPL code. Your base LPL code, LPL being the language that the Landmark is written in, that Landmark applications are written in. Your base LPL code exists in the system. Configuration changes stay on top of that base LPL code. So what the system will look at the configuration and change according to whatever that configuration is, and then personalizations actually live on top of that. So what that means is like Matt has said, you're not changing the base code. The configurations live by themselves, and the personalizations live on top of that. So it's like a top-down approach.
Right. It's almost like if you looked at it, like we said, that we've got the layers there. It's like a wedding cake. You know, we've got the personalizations that are sitting up top and the configurations and the base code down at the bottom. That base landmark pattern language is sitting down there and you can't touch it. You're not able to touch it and therefore you can't destroy it, which is really the good part about it. And it's really, really powerful. The neat thing about it as well, and this is kind of a change in, you know, the S3 world from what we're used to, like with when we're talking about customizations, you were modifying that code. The really weird thing, and it's kind of hard to get our heads around it sometimes when we're thinking about it in that customization mindset, these records for our personalizations and configuration changes, they're actually just database records that are sitting in there. They're just basically things that we're layering on top of our base code and making it look and feel different. So there's really no concern about destroying that code down at the bottom. So now we'll move into why is configuration so great. If anybody has seen me at Inforum or anything like that, or talked to me in any length of time, you know that I will talk about configurations for weeks on end. So Chip, pull me back on this one.
It's scary. It is scary. We could be here a while.
Yeah, I will try not to get too excited about this. But really, the configuration console is really great because we're able to adapt the software to our business processes. I can take this same talent management suite, push it out to everybody, but everybody can have their own experience with it. We can really, you know, make it work for our companies. Our individual organizations can all have something slightly different and make it work for themselves. Really adapt to the business processes that are out there for that organization. They're fairly update proof. I'm not going to tell you that, you know, if you take an upgrade or you have a CU that it gets applied, that it's always going to not disrupt a configuration. It can happen, but the nice thing is it's changing on that base layer way underneath. So our configurations, if they kick out, they're just kicked out and you go back to the base code. You're not actually bringing down the entire application at that point. It's really nice. They've added some utilities in the more recent versions where you can actually see exactly which configurations have problems. If you happen to upgrade something and they change a relationship or they've added a new field or renamed a field, you can see that pretty quickly and easily that this particular configuration on this form or this list might be wrong and it will kick out. No matter what, our worst case scenario there is we're going to see the system delivered out of the box. We're not bringing down the entire system, so that's good. Really, really good thing, we've already touched on it a little bit, there is no COBOL. If you're not somebody who can speak COBOL, if you're not somebody who is a programmer, if you're just normal people who can't understand that kind of stuff, it's easy to learn. If somebody like me can pick it up, I promise you guys can pick it up as well. It's very easy to learn, and you really, after a little bit of time, you really get good at it, and you can pretty much look at any form and say, here's the change I need to make, and you can do it very quickly. The other thing that's really nice about it is because we're not touching that base code, we don't have to recompile the entire system or anything like that. We're not going through and making a big customization. We don't have to reconfigure or recompile it, so these changes can take place immediately. So it's really, really quick and powerful for us to be able to roll something out quickly and easily, even if you just realize on the fly, worst case scenario, we need this extra field, you can add it. And it can be done at the super user level if you needed to, or whomever you roll out to.
He does talk a long time.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. The really nice thing that I like about it is the ability to just kind of you don't, like you said, you don't have to read code. It's a GUI. It's a visual. It's a visual UI. So you can go and point and click through things. If you are a code guy, you can look at the code and determine what it is. But it's pretty easy. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the concepts. So landmark applications are built using LPL, which is loss and pattern language, and really it's kind of it's a derivative of Java. So it's a higher level language than Java. It's basically generates Java code. The LPL code is stored in the landmark database. The nice thing about that is, like, if you want to, if everything is accessible through SQL. If you want to go look at what code's out there, you can see it through SQL. And it can be queried. You can also use Spreadsheet Designer, and there are other tools to get at it, but I like the fact that you can use SQL.
Right, and the neat thing with that as well is if you're running, you've got your test system over here in your production box, you can query both of those at the same time and see where are the differences in my code.
Right.
I can see it very quickly.
Right, and because it is stored in the database, it's easy to migrate. So it allows you to, when you want to migrate configurations from one to another, you can do it with Spreadsheet Designer.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. Configurations are cached, and what that means is when you do a configuration, it's cached in memory so that it's quickly accessible. It does take effect immediately, but it is cached, so it's not, it doesn't go back to the database every time so you lose that performance. You can change the cache intervals, and the cache can be managed through Configuration Console.
So yeah, how easy is it to do some of these configuration changes? Okay, now right here you can see some of this LPL code, and if you had never seen it before, or if you're just somebody who's not adept at coding or is intimidated by coding, you might look at that and kind of run screaming and say, what am I supposed to do with this? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The tool itself, Configuration Console, is very, very easy to understand and very easy to use. So you're looking right now at this LPL for this menu. And this menu is creating this. When you're using the Configuration Console, it's all what you see is what you get for the most part. And I can sit here and say, all right, well, I want to get rid of bonus objectives. We don't use them, we don't need them. I can go in to Configuration Console and remove that entire section from the menu. It will no longer show up on the form. And the nice thing is, you don't have to go into lines 11 and 12, comment them out or delete them. Configuration Console will do it for you. As you grow and learn the product a little bit more and really get adept with LPL, you can just go in and change the base code, and at a certain point you'll kind of leave behind that nice little GUI that's out there for making the configuration changes that way, and you'll just go in, modify the LPL. You'll be moving LPL all over the place. You'll steal it from one form, put it on another. You'll get very good at it very quick, but it's very easy to understand. And the other really good thing about it is if you were going in and working with the LPL, it checks itself automatically. So if I put in something that is invalid or illegal by LPL standards, it's not even going to let me save that configuration. It will notify me right away with a little red line saying, this is invalid, you can't do it. So it's very quick to understand and very quick to pick up.
The other nice thing is, so we've gone in here and we want to delete something out of there. So we delete the time records link. And so now the time records link is gone. We've lost that LPL code. Well, we haven't. Because of the top-down approach, we've never actually lost this original form. What we've done is we've created a configuration on top of it. And anytime we want to go back to that base code, we just have to delete the configuration.
Right.
So it's it really keeps you from shooting yourself in the foot.
Exactly. And for some people who might be thinking already, for the people who really know coding, you might be saying right away, well, wait a second, what about version control? So what if I made 15 changes to it, but the one 3 times ago is the one we really wanted? The system is actually keeping track of each one of those iterations. So you can actually pull up the history of the code changes that you've made and revert back to that quickly and easily. It's all keeping track of it. It's all version controlled within there.
Yep. So, all right. Man, we can both talk a lot about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's walk through an example. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give our in-basket a facelift. So we're going to use, let's use Configuration Console to add a column to the work unit list in the in-basket. So this is our requirement. We're going to add a column, and it looks like we're going to add the approval type column. One thing to note, we're using it for the in-basket, but it is not, the configuration console is not readily available for IPA. If you have GHR installed, you get delivered those global UI security classes and roles. But there's a way around that. We actually load that security class up. It's on the machine. We can actually load it up. So basically what we need to do is we need to create or modify a role to include that global UI config access class and assign it to the appropriate data area, which in this case is going to be our IPA data area.
Right. And it will all depend upon who you roll this out to as well. You may create multiple versions of like the HR generalist role and say that there's going to be an HRIS super user or something like that. We could create that role and then just add in the configuration access _ST class to it, and then those people will be able to do it. We're kind of pushing that work out from somebody in IT, and we can allow some people to actually do it themselves.
Right. Within reason.
Within reason, yes.
Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to go to the, in order to assign that security class to the role, we'll load it in, the global UI config access _ST role, and we'll assign it to a role that's on the IPA, in the IPA product line. So for example, our data area, our product line here is called DIL. We're going to assign the global UI config access _ST role to that data area. And if you've had any experience with this, you understand that the standard turnaround time for a security change in Landmark is 15 minutes. But we can change that. There's actually an article in the help guide that'll allow you to change it down to to whatever you want to change it to. But Infor suggests not to go below 2 minutes, and never do it on your production system.
Right.
You never want to do this on your production system. This is only for your tests, so you can do testing and stuff like that. So you never want to do it on production. So. So we'll go to Start and then Configure, and choose the application, because we're making an application configuration. And then we will choose the in-basket list, which it's called My Work. So we'll choose that My Work list, and we'll just we can literally add a column in there, and we're going to call our column the service definition short description. And it's really that simple. It's just clicking and adding it in.
And then we can modify that label to be whatever we want. So we could call it approval type. We can call it Joe if we wanted to. It doesn't matter.
If we wanted to call it Joe.
If we really wanted to, I wouldn't recommend it.
And voila, we see a new column, just like that. So it updates on the fly. So we can go directly into the in-basket and we'll see that column.
So you might be saying to yourself, well, we've talked about some configurations here, but what if we want to handle it a different way? Is there an easier way rather than going into configuration console? Configurations, just so you are aware, when you create a configuration change, it is applied instantly to all users of the system. So right away, everybody's going to see that change. But if we wanted to just change something for ourselves quickly, we can create a personalization. And it's just as easy as that. A lot of the same kind of screens that you're going to see are what we saw in configuration console. Same kinds of modifications you can make. There's really only one big difference, or two differences, between what you can do with a personalization or a configuration. But I can sit here very quickly. If I've got the personalization role applied to me, I can go in and click on any list or form, click on the double chevrons there, the down arrows, go to Options, and you'll see a Personalize button show up. When I invoke the Personalize button, at that point it's going to bring up the same kind of screens that we saw in Configuration Console. If we get to the point where we look at that personalization, or I'm sitting here working on something, I have a personalization on the screen, and Chip comes over to my screen and looks at it and says, oh, that's really cool.
It's a great idea.
It is, I know. You know what? We should show it to everybody right now. We're going to go public. We're going to shove it out there to everybody. We can very quickly and easily take that personalization, and right in my personalizations, when I bring that up, there's going to be a button. If I've also got the configuration role on me, I can take that personalization, click on the Make Global button, and that's going to push that personalization out to everybody as a configuration change. So right away, I've made that change, and now everybody in the organization can see that. Very quick and easy for us to be able to push that ability to other people. So we've talked kind of at a higher level of what Configuration Console can do for you. The quick answer is it can do a lot. Quite frankly, we can look at application modifications. I could talk for years on this. So what we can do is we can modify things like the menus. We already looked at that a little bit. We can modify pages. We can modify lists. We can modify forms. We can even create custom actions, which is something that a lot of very early versions of LTM and Global HR didn't have. They were kind of, here's your 3 actions that were out there, and that was all you could do. But now with Configuration Console and with a little bit of IPA development, you can actually go in and create a fully new custom action, which will perform everything you need to with a custom screen that's invoked and custom approvals and everything. We can also go through now and create relationships between business classes. So if there's not a relationship that's already built, if you're familiar with database design, and you wanted to relate these 2 tables which aren't already linked together, we can create that relationship between the 2 of them. Coming very soon, we'll talk about it a little bit, in version 11 of LTM, and I think it's a version 11 of Landmark as well?
Yeah, it's Landmark version 11.
Okay, sorry, Landmark version 11. You can now create your own business class. So if you have a full table that you needed to create for yourself, you're going to be able to do that now. Action requests, I kind of talked about that already. We can take the delivered actions that are out there or custom actions that we wanted to, or that we needed, and we can route them for specific approvals. If we do a little bit of work on the IPA side, modify that flow, and we can get that custom form over to people for approvals. Security, this is obviously really, really big and important. We can also take one of those new forms that we made, or one of the new fields that we put on a form, and secure it down to only the people we want to be able to see that. Very, very important, especially if we're dealing with a lot of employee data. Maybe there's some pay data that we don't want to allow everybody to see. We can secure that down and only let HR people see it, for example. Web services. We can also create and modify web services, and those web services can also return a value and populate Landmark with it. So very powerful on that. And obviously we can also do our cache management in there. So if we've made any of these changes and we need to get it out sooner, Configuration Console is going to allow us to clear the cache out and basically wipe the slate clean for everybody security-wise and see that change show up on everybody's machine right away.
All right, so let's talk about another use case that we've seen, and if you're implementing GHR, a lot of and you need new fields, for example, like some of the not all the fields are in the application that you need. You can add a new field. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new field to the employee record, and how we're going to do that is we're going to add the field to the as a user field. And then we'll add it to the screens, and then we'll add the field to a new hire action request, and that will get routed for approval. So this, step one, the first step we're going to do is we're going to add the field to the business class. Again, you're going to go to Start and configure application, and then when we will find the employee business class. And one unique thing that you have to do is, because we are adding code, and we're not taking code away or deleting code, it's actually we're adding a new configuration. So we'll add a new configuration to the employee business class. So what we need to do is we'll define that field. We'll define the field name, the data type. We can do some labeling if we want to change the label, if we want to have a default label, and then we can do some validation logic, and we can make it, derive it from other fields and stuff like that. And then Landmark will handle the persistence, meaning the way that it moves around the system.
Right. One more note on the data fields by themselves. You have the ability, as Chip mentioned, you can create any kind of field that you need. If you need something as a date field, you can add it specifically as a date. You can add numeric fields. You can add something all the way down to a document if you needed to. If there was a specific document that was not able to be handled anywhere else, or it was very specific to that business class, you can add a document type in there. And you can also add, as you said, you can add values. You can have it be a drop-down list instead, so you don't have users free texting anything they want into the system. You can give those values on there as well.
Yep. So the second step we're going to perform is we're going to actually add the field to the employee profile. And so what we've got pictured here is the application configuration for the LRC employee. I believe it's the LRC employee form. And of course, we've defined the field, but we haven't put it anywhere in the system, so nobody can see the field. It's just a field in the background. So we got to add it to the employee profile screen. We're going to do that by going to configure application and finding our form this time, which is LRC employee, and clicking add to add the new configuration. So some of the tools that actually help you along the way and are very important is Control-Shift left-click. Very important. So if you Control-Shift left-click anywhere in GHR or Landmark, you can actually find out what business class, what field, what form, what field. It's like Control-Shift-O in S3. So it tells you where things live. So if we needed to know what form something was, we just Control-Shift left-click, and then that's the form we're going to configure. Then you can position the field on the page and set, there's a lot of opportunities to set visual styling, the color, default values. If you want to change the label for some reason, bolding, and a lot of text editing features on there. And we'll continue on to step 3, and then so step 3, we're going to edit the action request. So we're going to, in order for us to update this field that we've added, we actually have to add it to an action request where the data is being entered into the system and pulled into and can be pulled into the action request.
Right. And the nice thing about this is when we add it onto the action request, we're also giving the ability to whomever has access to that action to update it. So it no longer has to be a generalist only who can enter a user field. You can push it out to a manager and they can populate the field. And when you do that, the nice thing is there's no additional coding that you need to do. If I'm adding that new field onto an action form, as soon as I do that, and somebody executes that action, that field is going to be updated through the action request. You don't have to go in and modify the process flow behind the scenes. You don't have to add in something that says, okay, this brand new field, make sure it's invoked and make sure it gets updated at the very end after somebody approves it. It's automatically taking that and passing that new value through the entire system.
Right. Very important point. So we're gonna add it to the we're gonna add the field that we created to the form. Again, all of the same types of labeling and different styles and things are available on the form as well. And then but if you, for some reason, if you needed to update other data in the system with this field, you could through the action request. It becomes available as an action request and available in the IPA flow. So if for whatever reason you needed to send out an email to a specific group of people saying that this field was updated, you would do that in the IPA flow.
Right.
And it's available there.
It's actionable data right away. It basically incorporates itself into the business class itself. So if we are ever looking for this field through a landmark tool like Spreadsheet Designer or Process Designer, right away, if we invoke the employee business class, we're going to see that new field show up right inside that list of available fields.
So the final step we're going to talk about is we actually, if this is a field that needs to be secured from certain folks and available for other folks, we're going to update, we're going to edit the security class. The classes are defined at the application level. When you do add a field and you do need to secure it, you need to make sure that you check all of the associated security classes, because this could affect many different security classes. Depending on what business class you've added it to.
Right.
And one important thing to note is the greatest access wins. So if you take it away on one security class and forget to take it away on the other security class, and the same user has both of those, then the greater access wins. So they'll be able to see the field. And then another important point is when you are modifying security, you will always want to create your own security classes and roles. The system in certain respects will not let you create classes or roles, but you always will not allow you to update classes or roles, but you always want to create your own, because what will happen when you get a CU delivered is the CU will wipe out and replace all your security roles. So you want to create your own naming schema and for security.
Right, they've been very good now about not allowing you to update those _ST roles. There's a couple exceptions out there now where we know that we have to update those. Something like a candidate ST role, we have to update, because if we add something that we want a candidate to fill out, that candidate role is being pushed out to every candidate out there in the world who accesses the talent acquisition system. So we do have to be careful on that. And security, honestly, to make sure that you lock down that field, it does become kind of an exercise in patience at a certain point. You do have to look at every single one of those, every security class that's out there to make sure it's not invoked somewhere else. Can be very frustrating, but
yeah, and take a long time. There are some tools like we said before. You can use SQL to view the security that's in the system, or you can dump it out. Like what I like to do is I like to dump it out in Spreadsheet Designer and do searches through Spreadsheet Designer. So that's one
powerful and easy tools.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything that we've talked about here, it all sounds really, really good. There's a lot of power behind it. There are a few limitations that we just kind of want to bring up, just kind of as a little warning, little gotchas that we've seen that have tripped up some clients. So one of the big limitations is for the business class, if we're sharing a field between business classes, it can be tricky to make sure that they get updated in both places. It sounds weird the way we're talking about it, but a real life example would be if we created a user field. I'm going to go back to talent acquisition and say we're creating a new user field on the candidate. And when we want, that field's going to be very important as well for an employee. We can create that user field both on the candidate business class and the employee business class. If we name them the exact same thing, when we perform an action, like a hire action at that point, it will pull over everything from the candidate business class and put it onto the employee business class automatically, including that user field. So you can definitely pull from one side and put it on the other without having to do extra coding. Just name them the same and we're going to be okay. There's also basically some set rules that apply to any kind of field types that are out there, specifically when it comes to like calculations is a big one. If you've got date fields, there's a very limited number of calculations you can perform on it. Some simple date add, date difference you can do, but you can't do too much. You can't do complex mathematical formulas with it. You're kind of limited to, the ones that are kind of out of the box, things that you would expect. I can't multiply a text field no matter how hard I try. So one thing to look out for. Because we're talking about configurations and personalizations, we do have to be careful as well that because it's that layered philosophy, just as your configuration change is masking what the delivered LPL code does, a personalization can also mask a configuration change. So it's something that's very important that when you're going out there and making configuration changes, there's actually the ability now to create your configuration and override everybody else's personalizations. If you've got personalizations rolled out to only a few people, you can notify them. If you have it rolled out to tons and tons of people and you want to make them angry, just click that button and it will wipe everything out for them. We wouldn't recommend that, but the nice thing is though, if you were to do that, again, they're all database records, so we can always go back and retrieve what that person's personalization was. And you can also kind of verify before you put out a new configuration change that I'm not going to blow up somebody's personalization. There are limited one-to-many relationships that are available. A lot of them are delivered in the system right now between business classes. So something like the employee record has a one-to-many relationship with employee address. You can have hundreds of email or addresses if you really wanted to. But it's very hard for us to invoke those. We can't display all of the addresses or update just the first address very easily from one form on employee. So there's some limitations that we have in Configuration Console on that. And then I think one of the big ones, we talked a lot about, using SQL to get this data back out. Very true. But if we created like a new user field, and I said, a couple minutes ago, if we create a new user field on employee, it's incorporated in the employee business class if you're using a landmark tool. Spreadsheet Designer and Process Designer will pull that automatically as part of employee. If you were to go through an ODBC server or a SQL server to try to get to that data, you won't see it in the employee business class. At that point, you do have to go through and link through with the unique ID and pull into the, I think, user field storage business class. So a couple little gotchas that have tripped up a few people.
It's a lot like the S3 relationship for HR user fields,
exactly,
where it's stored in a different table that gives you unlimited amounts that you can create. So
right.
And then I want to talk a little bit about the potential for new business classes. Probably one of the more exciting things to me about Landmark 11 is the fact that we will be able to create new business classes. So we can extend existing records with detail records, like extra added demographic information for employees. It's going to be very useful for our interfacing with other systems. We can create these new business classes. We can pull in data from other business classes, and then set codes and things that are specific to these other for these interfaces. So one of the things that I will tell you is it's not going to create a new table in your system. It's a lot like a group of user fields. So it's going to create in its own table this group of user fields that are all related together with unique IDs. So.
Mm-hmm. So some final thoughts before we field some questions. Hope you've got all the questions ready because we're ready for them. So. As we kind of mentioned before, most configurations will upgrade fine, okay? But that being said, make sure that you test any of them very thoroughly after you go through any kind of critical update or any kind of update to the system. Just make sure that they are still performing the way you would expect. And most importantly, if you're looking at like a form configuration, make sure that you're still getting all the fields that you want on there. The other thing that I would kind of say as a corollary to that is because you've got a configuration change that's out there, let's just say that they modified the employee detail page and they added in a brand new field. So we've got that CU applied, it's happened. That new field is sitting out there, but your configuration, which is still valid, is still masking that change. So just make sure that you kind of check it on both sides, not only for your configurations to make sure they're coming through, but also to make sure that any new information that's on that, the delivered form, is available for you. Don't forget to test security changes with every single role. The number of times I think you and I have talked to a client who, they've secured it only in this one security class, but it's still showing up. Why is it still showing up? Why they shouldn't be able to see this? Why can't they see? We have to look at every single one of those security classes. So just a little gotcha that happens there. Even though there's version control built into the system with those date and time stamps of when these changes were made, we really do recommend as a best practice to document all these configuration changes outside of the system. As simple change control would dictate, we really want to be able to have a catalog of those. But there's a lot of it that's built in. We can roll back pretty easily, but we still want to know why we made that change.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea because, we've seen instances where things have gotten cleaned out that you have to go back and be like, oh my gosh, we're missing these fields, and so it's really a great idea to document all your changes to the landmark system.
Absolutely. So kind of in summary, Configuration Console is a very, very powerful tool. It does have some limitations, okay? So just remember that, as we said at the very beginning of this, you are never modifying the base LPL. It is not supported by Infor. If you're to do that, I think they would just kind of punt right away on that if you put in an issue. Did you touch the LPL? Yeah. Okay, hang up the phone at that point. It's done.
Yeah.
And also, don't modify classes or roles that end in ST, or your changes will be lost, just like we were talking about with those with the security classes and roles. Very, very limited exceptions to that, but in general, even if it allows you to modify an ST role or ST class, you should probably not do it unless you really, really have a good documented business need, and document that out as well, because you will lose it during a critical update.
All right. Any questions?
Yeah, we do have some questions actually. So one of these says, so this is just Landmark, so with version 11, Cloud Suite LSF will no longer exist for finance and procurement. So Configuration Console is for Landmark. Maybe you guys can expand on that.
Yeah.
What does this affect?
So Configuration Console is for Landmark, so all the applications that come with Landmark, you can use Configuration Console.
So it'll be all the finance and procurement for version 11, but also all the global HR today, all the talent management. And even though for some reason we don't see as much of it in contract management, that's how you would make modifications on that end as well.
Absolutely.
Another question is this a desktop software per PC? Is it like per user?
No, it's actually available through Rich Client, and it's embedded into the software. It's not like Loss and Security where you have to download you have to download Rich Client, but you don't have to download a separate application for it.
Right, and the nice thing there is even if all of if everybody in your organization is not using Rich Client, i.e. for employee or manager space, which I don't know anybody who would roll out Rich Client to everybody like that.
That would be fun.
Yeah, if there are any people like that, let us know. We'll help. But if you make a change in Configuration Console on Rich Client, it will apply itself for the most part. There's very few exceptions where you have to do something extra in employee or manager space to make that show up. So it does translate very well to the web UIs.
Next question, is documentation available for Configuration Console? Where to find?
The documentation can be downloaded from Infor Extreme. I think it's the Configuration Console User Guide underneath the Landmark in your documentation center.
You should be able to see it right in the Rich Client help section if you don't have access to Infor Extreme.
Next one is, which Landmark tool besides Spreadsheet Designer can be used to easily see personalizations?
Could you repeat that first part of it again?
Yeah.
Just one more time.
So which Landmark tool besides Spreadsheet Designer can be used to easily see personalizations? Or I guess the question is there a tool? other than Spreadsheet Designer?
Yes, outside of Spreadsheet Designer, something that you can do very easily is go into your rich client. You are going to have to look at it in rich client itself. Go up to your search box up in the top corner and type in user, and then if you're looking for a personalization on a user form, for example, just type in user form, all one word, no spaces, and that will give you a list of every single configuration and personalization that is out there on all the or on the forms. The way you would know the difference between the two would be just to see if there was a specific actor listed on that configuration. If you saw an actor, that means automatically that it is a personalization. If you don't see an actor, you can safely say that it's a configuration. So you can do that for user fields, user forms, user menus, pages, actions, something I'm missing right now, but the only difference, as I was kind of alluding to before, that between the differences between personalization and configuration, you will never find a personalized user field. It can't happen. By its nature, it doesn't make any sense, so you're never going to see a personalization on a user field.
Can personalizations be shared with a group of users, i.e. not everyone?
Yes, there's no delivered tool to do that. What you can do, you've got a couple different plays on it. You can copy the LPL and send it to people. You can also go behind the scenes and take that personalization that is out there and apply it to other actors. You can always send us an email or give us a call and we can walk you through that process, but you can kind of share it to a smaller select group.